Once again, thank you, Manoj. And that brings us to another very important session that we have lined up, and we probably kept the best for the last. And we'll be talking about nourishing sustainability, startups at the frontier of food innovation. The pursuit of a resilient and inclusive food system beckons us, calling for sustainable practices, innovation technologies, and mindful consumption. I would like to invite on stage some very special guests: Agam Khare, founder and CEO of Absolute; Alekh Sanghera, co-founder and CEO FarMart. We have Hemendra Mathur, venture partner at Bharat Innovation Fund; and Shiva Shanker, who's going to be a moderator. Shiva is the investment director at Ankur Capital. Over to the panel.
Thanks, Upasana, for the introductions. I'll just do a very quick intro round, but I will let each of these eminent panelists that are with me introduce themselves and the businesses that they're operating in. Agam is the CEO, as Upasana mentioned, of Absolute Foods, and relative to what we see as a lot of other companies in the agri value chain, they aren't just looking at how produce can move, optimize value chains, but they're also doing a lot of deep science work, which is where I thought having someone come in of thinking about what you can do to radically change and disrupt a value chain by thinking of new product innovations, new types of materials that could come in. So Absolute works on a number of different value chains, but we'll focus on the conversation today with Agam on some of the agri opportunities that they're working with. Alekh has been scaling up the business at FarMart and looking at how you can play with data through all the steps in the value chain and how you can optimize agricultural produce, particularly in the staples, and drive efficiencies through the overall business there. Hemendra is an industry veteran who has looked at the agri domain for, Hemendra, you can correct me on how many years, but has been there from before the agri-tech domain really played out and has seen the evolution of the entire ecosystem. And I'll pick on Hemendra for the first question anyways, because he spent the last 3 days also with one of the organizations that you see on his bio over there, ThinkAg, which has a 3-day conference right now in the last 3 days where they had a range of industry stakeholders from the agri domain, domestically, globally, startups, all in one forum, talking about what is the frontier, what is the new innovations coming through, and what are the opportunities to build out. So, Hemendra, since you have had the most live context right before you came from the airport to join us for this panel, would love to kick off with you on just how you see the overall landscape as it stands right now for the innovations that can come through the agri domain, and what are the areas that are most exciting right now to meet the sustainability needs from an agri lens?
Thanks, Tai. Thanks, Shiva. So if you look at agri-tech landscape, probably 15 to 18 years old, though agri-innovation has been happening for many years. Green revolution was largely because of innovations on the R&D side, but so-called agri-tech innovation, driven by startups, I would say started in around 2009-10, and probably we are in the third phase of agri-tech. The first phase was 5-7 years. I would say was more experimentation just to figure out whether these new age models are going to work or not. Bunch of entrepreneurs like Agam and Alekh, I think these are early starters who came into the sector and tried to build very interesting models. It took some time for those models to scale, figure out what is the moat, get to post-POC stage. Venture capital was almost non-existent because everyone saw more risk than reward when it came to agri-tech. 2017 onward, there were like an army of entrepreneurs who got into the sector, mostly coming from non-agricultural background with a strong tech legacy. And they, I would say, brought a very different lens to the sector. Sometimes it's said that ignorance is bliss, and I think that worked well because they saw the sector with a very different way, and they tried to solve problem in a very different way. And then we saw a bunch of solutions around market linkage, connecting farmers with the markets, building supply chain focused on agri inputs, making good inputs available to farmers at right price, right quality, etc. Bunch of solutions around mechanization. Whole data space kind of disrupted. For the first time, we saw significant digitization of the supply chain and a lot of models which were data driven. solving for credit, solving for insurance. And thankfully, now we are getting into the third phase where we have seen maturity. About $3 billion has come, 80%, 70% in the last 3-4 years. So there's some sort of inflection point, although very, very less in the context of the sector size. The food sector in India is almost $800 billion. We are hopefully touching $1 trillion food economy next few years. So in the context of the sector, it's still a trickle or a drop in the ocean. But having said that, I think a lot of mainstream capital is warming up to the sector, which is a good news. So I think the phase 3 is more about consolidation. There have been enough pivots which have happened. We have some really good large-scaled startups. I'm very hopeful at least 2-3 of them will hit the public markets in next maybe 5 years. And I think another wave which has started is some new dimensions around deep tech, biotech, and so-called climate tech to solve for sustainability. To be very frank, sustainability or climate tech was not the core of agri-tech to begin with. There are enough challenges in agriculture, so it was somewhere at the periphery, but it is becoming more and more central, and I'm very hopeful. We are going to see very interesting innovations on the climate side in terms of optimizing use of pesticides, use of chemical fertilizers, building interesting biological solutions, a lot of data-driven financing, so-called green financing or climate financing, parametric insurance. I think that's a huge opportunity in waiting. So a lot of these solutions, I would say, were at very infancy stage, but likely to become mainstream in the time to come.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Hemendra. I think there's the sustainability and the fact that this wasn't core to the climate lens of how the agri-tech startup ecosystem evolved. Completely agree with you there. I think there was enough opportunities there that were just tied with inherently looking at how you increase farmer income, look at how you can get not just mitigation of the waste that was in the value chain, but say how you drive value to the stakeholders, which from our lens also we look at, say, this is not just about a climate mitigation place, but I think from a national perspective, we also have a resilience model we need to build out of saying the farmers do need support and models built out, but I think that's a separate conversation we can get deeper into. I'll come back to you, Hemendra, on some of the agri-corporate thought process, but we'd love to get into just a lens from Alekh, since you also look at a range of different stakeholders that are working with FarMart as a platform, right from farmers, kind of processors, retailers that are there as well. Would love if you to just quickly introduce FarMart, what you guys do there, and just how you've seen the lens of risk and climate risk from those stakeholders, especially in the last few years, if there's been any change with how they have started thinking about these things as information becomes more prevalent to them as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. So, basically FarMart is a B2B food supply network. We help food, ingredient, beverage companies to source more sustainably through a very, very lean value chain. So what I've seen over the last 5 years is, I think sustainability was, like Hemendra said, on the periphery, but now it's actually become a core thesis for many companies. So we sell to very large B2B companies, and the two ways, the market has changed over the last 3 or 4 odd years is, we try to, so there's unlocking business and unlocking capital. So when I talk about unlocking business, many of these food companies would not entertain, having a new vendor onboarded very easily. Surprisingly, when technology is basically making the food more traceable, making sure that farmers are getting paid on time, making sure the supply chain is very lean, or where are you doing processing, what kind of supply chains are you running, how short are they, what is the carbon emission level at each truckload you kind of ship. These are the kind of value proposition which large companies are actually looking for. And this is simply because every company's board has given mandated to the management to their net zero goals. So I think food innovation as a whole will become much more conscious on the way we impact the planet. And that, because the buyers are so conscious now, it's obviously starting from the consumers, it's going to trickle all the way down to the farm gates. I think that journey is still maybe a step away, but it is happening. And the second thing is just unlocking capital. I think in today's world, if you don't inherit the DNA of being a sustainable company, or at least having the right initiatives and your heart at the right place, unlocking capital in the future is going to be almost near impossible. I'm going to that extent because we see it now more than ever, because the LPs or whoever's investing into most of these funds have clear mandates given to fund managers to look at this piece very, very clearly. We have like ESG reporting now in our company, which was never there 5 years ago. So all these changes have been very, very positive from like, the top-down effect also.
And Alekh, are you seeing that in Indian corporates as well? The reason I'm flagging that is from global corporates, especially in the agri domain, where several of them would be European organizations which have had not just scope 1, scope 2, but also scope 3 emission requirements that have played out. There's probably a bit more of a holistic value chain view they have to have. And I hear you that from a startup ecosystem in India, what was, I'd say even when we had started operating Fund 1, where it wasn't that there was a consistency of how the ecosystem would look at it, you moved from that to ESG reporting probably in the last 4 or 5 years. Now it's clear that the next horizon, as we engage with LPs, it's clear that the next horizon is going to be much more detailed on the carbon tracings from scope 1, scope 2, at least from the investee companies as well. So it's clear that from a startup ecosystem that's playing out, and I'd say some of the larger global corporates that's playing out. But have you also seen that similar initiative come through from Indian corporates as well? And is that a BRSR kind of timed thing in the last 12, 18 months, or has it been a bit more holistic in how that's evolved?
I think it will be a forced intervention from an Indian standpoint. Like SEBI, obviously there's going to be now, public companies will have to report this. It's mandated. And I think Indian ecosystem will very quickly mature into it. So Indian companies have realized it. Some of them are obviously ahead of the times to start doing it now. But probably in 18 months, we'll be having a very different conversation we are today, because it's going to be forced on to everyone almost.
Great to have that. So Agam, from your side, I know there's a range of different businesses that you guys are in from business lines that are on the food export side, but would love to just understand from the innovation that's in Zenosys, which again, I know does products across different domains, but specifically as you're looking at the agri inputs and the agri kind of the value chain that can be developed from new types of products. We'd love for you to just kind of set context anyways first for Absolute more broadly, because I will not be able to do it justice, but also from what Zenosys is doing as new products to kind of come into the agri domain. Would love for you to talk through that a little bit more, to just set the context of here's how new innovations from a product perspective are also coming through from a agri-tech domain and what that means for food sustainability really going forward.
Thanks. Thank you for having me here. Absolute is a biotech company for everybody. In simple layman terms, we understand how nature makes decisions. And using that nature's wisdom, we create products in 3 spaces: in agriculture, biomaterials, and healthcare. Zenosys is our research center, which I was referring to. We are all in the sustainability summit. My belief is that sustainability happens when all stakeholders win, and they have some sort of consensus towards that winning goal. If you look at our world today, and especially agriculture or any business for that matter, on one side you have producers. In agriculture, they are farmers. In other businesses, there will still be manufacturers. The others are consumers. And the third is planet. So once all 3 stakeholders win, then sustainability happens at scale. The job of companies and new emerging technologies is to enable that winning habit across these stakeholders. So let's, for example, take agriculture. How does a farmer really win? So for a farmer to win, his income has to go up. Now, what is the income a function of? If you break it down, the income is a function of 3-4 things. First, he has to be able to grow fantastic produce, which is substantially better than what he's able to grow. So the quality of the produce has to go up such that he's able to sell in better markets, claim better money, right? The second is his yield can go up, and so if he grows more, then he can get more money. The third is he can find better markets, and so therefore make more money. So maybe India is one market, UK is a market, Europe is a market, Southeast Asia is a different market. All of these different markets have different dynamics. But a farmer sitting in India or a farmer sitting in Brazil may not know where to sell, how to sell. And so if his income has to go up, he has to be aware, he has to be connected, and he has to be able to do all those processes very well. So the third area is for him to find or her to find better markets. And the fourth area is to be able to cultivate at a much lesser price. And if they can cultivate all of this biologically or organically, then they have a right to claim further premium in the market. And in my view, if you can do all 4 or 5 of these things, then the first stakeholder, the farmer, really wins in agriculture, and along with sustainability. So not just the farmer, the planet also wins. Now look at the other side of equation. Look at the consumer side of equation. Consumers could be large B2B companies, they could be consumers like us, could be anybody. Now how do they win? They essentially want at better pricing, better commodities. Now we may not be every day, we eat so much, and then we may not be aware whether what sort of chemicals came into it, whether some were harmful or not harmful. That's not our job also. That's science job to figure out a way in which the entire process can be driven and still be very safe and sustainable. And so if biologics can replace all of these chemicals, which are harmful in nature, by the way, chemicals are not bad. We are all made of chemicals. So not saying that chemicals are bad, but some of them are extremely harmful to deter the functions going around in the body and environment. So if they can be replaced with biologics, then there is a chance for the planet and the consumer to win, right, together. And so if all stakeholders win, therefore, this way, then I feel there is a chance for our planet, for our producers, for a very large number of farmers, and for consumers. And everybody can succeed, and there will be real sustainability. Now look at the other side of equation. Look at the climate, the carbon equation that we have been talking about. Carbon is one, methane is another. There are a number of issues. If you look at the history of our planet has always been heating up. So this whole thought process that the planet is heating up and will go up a degree or 1.5 degrees, while it's fine, the planet has always been in that equation. If the Earth was not heating up, we wouldn't be here today, right? We would be living in Ice Age. So the planet has always been heating up. That's our normal behavior of the planet because the Earth is rotating. Now, in that, there is pollution, and there are things, there are chemicals going into our water table and our body which are harmful. So there has to be a way in which you have to be able to avoid all of that, and then there is carbon which is extra in the air which needs to go back, or there is methane which is extra which needs to go back. How do you do that? The moment the only way you can do that at scale, at a very, very low price, is by increasing biodiversity in the soil, on this planet. And that is how Earth has managed itself for billions of years. Earth came around 4.5 billion years ago. Our people came in at about 200,000 years ago. So for 2 lakh years, Earth has been balancing out with all of us, with people, by just managing that biodiversity. So the moment the number of microflora and fauna increases, the microbes in the soil, the bacteria, the fungus, they increase, and you start putting biologics back in soil, your biodiversity goes up, you sequester tons and tons more of carbon, and at scale, then you can start talking of sustainability. So Agri is that one part, but the other quick 2 parts are biomaterials, where we basically take cell from your skin, and then we multiply or clone that cell line so that it becomes the real skin. We don't do that for humans, but we do that for some animals like crocodile, ostrich, and calf. So you may potentially never need to kill those animals, and then you can have real leather, real skin without killing those animals, and you can be very, very sustainable then, because rearing them takes up so much more greenhouses, right? And the third part is the healthcare, where we do, all of us at some point in time have to eat medicines. Now APIs are very small part, the active pharma ingredients are very small part in that, but it is covered by drugs, which all of us consume. And so that's not very good for body. So what we are saying is that you can replace it with biologics, things that are good for body, good for planet. And so you can potentially replace all of them, replace all the petroleum-driven enzymes that we consume, and have a biological solution to that. So my sense is that fundamentally rethinking the problem statements in a biological way, we can actually reach real sustainability.
And Agam, as you look at the fact that now biologics need to go in, specifically going back to the agri value chain, and there is this opportunity to say, here's how we can get a much more diverse set of fungi, bacteria to start coming in by just improving the types of biostimulants we're providing the farmers. As you look at yourselves as a business that has to scale up on saying distributing this to the 500 million people that are then involved in the agricultural space in India, and you've had kind of coming against this baggage that farmers have been trained and educated on saying, here's how you do NPK for specifically what you're growing. How do you see that transition and the responsiveness from farmers, and how you guys are thinking about going to market with that? Because I think the nuance of how just they're consuming information and what you see as the opportunity to kind of distribute that so that it can actually move through the value chain. We'd just love to get your thoughts on that as well, of how that farmer buying behavior in some ways is changing.
So the clear answer to that is the moment you think of changing somebody's behavior, the moment you have entered a 10-year game. And so the real gist is, do not change anybody's behavior. If a farmer has to change the worldview, you have lost the battle. So do not change the worldview. Sell him or give him the product the way he's look at seeing it, the way he's used to experiencing it. If they buy granules, give them granules. If they buy liquid, give them liquid. If they like brown color, give them brown color. If they like a 1 kg bag, give them a 1 kg bag. So do not change their worldview, number one. Number two, your products have to perform. If they do not perform against the top chemicals, even if they are whatsoever great biologics or organic, they will not sell. You're trying to, science job is to solve a real world problem, planet scale problems, not hide behind saying that we are organic or biologicals, right? So they have to perform. So if they perform, and if they are in a nature that farmer is used to using, and they are priced at a point which the farmer is already used to paying, not overpriced, not charging a premium or something, then there will be scale. And that's what we have been seeing.
No, completely agree. I think what we have seen across several parts of this value chain, you need to understand where your own customer and the buyer is, and if you're trying to re-educate on a completely different journey, that is a much longer horizon, and he needs to see immediate value. I think as we look at the farmers as SMEs, as we have from an Ankur Capital perspective really taken that lens, this is a business who has to see if this is the investment you're asking him to make on risking what is one season's crop, he needs to be able to see the ROI immediately at the end of that season. If you're saying over 3 growing seasons, this is a solution that will start to show you improvements because of the de-risking, you're fighting a losing battle, and you need to be over a much longer horizon before those types of solutions can take effect. Alekh, from your side, as you're looking to develop the model, I know there's several of these SMEs that you are also working with, and just how are you guys seeing the consumer behavior or the user behavior when it comes to the different ways you are monetizing from them, SaaS solutions, otherwise, on saying here's the right way to build that value prop in a way that minimizes that kind of friction as you're onboarding new customers and enabling yourself to scale to a new user set?
Yeah, so in food and ag, we fundamentally believe that India's a very, very tough market to create any value from a software perspective. It's almost like water. We expect it to be free. But there are a subset of customers who are more or less your power users, and you can offer very specific solutions which they are ready to pay for. But it's a very, very hard journey to reach that subset, number one. Second is it takes time. You can't supplement that. And I think patience is one game which generally startups have very less on. So I think over the last 2.5 years, we've learned that you will get to that point at some level, whether it's a new product you introduce in the market, whether it's a software solution you're trying to sell, but it has to gain significant scale. So I think with whatever's happening in today's time, we kind of forget that these innovations are very, very early. We are in a very, very early stage, probably like half of phase one, and companies will have to spend money to reach a certain scale of operations, and then they'll find those power users, and a lot of things will flow. You can't expect, let's say a biotech company to tomorrow introduce a first generator product, put it into the market, do distribution, and then see results in like 2 seasons, right? It's just impossible. So it takes time, and you have to be at it for a long period of time. And I mean, Hemendra's been here for a long time to witness this over cycles, I think, more than anything else.
So Hemendra, I also wanted to go back to you from the lens of, we've talked of the overall landscape, how some of these users are now the large corporates are changing behavior globally, domestically as well. A lot of this goes to saying we are minimizing the carbon footprint of what we are procuring. That's kind of the lens that everyone seems to have gotten to of this new thing of saying scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, in how it's now this new optimization equation that's also being factored in. But for us as a nation, the climate mitigation from a carbon perspective is only one of many priorities we need to manage. The other is adaptation resilience for ourselves as a large populace. So how are you looking at that from the opportunity going forward, and how do you see that part of the landscape evolve in opportunity for startups, but also the problem that we need to be addressing as a nation?
Right. So again, if you take the innovation lens, I think when it comes to agriculture, there are 3 buckets. So the first bucket, as you mentioned, is more like climate risk mitigation. Second, I would say driving some sort of climate resilience. And third, I would say, which Agam and Alekh were referring to, is climate adaptation, right? If you look at the climate risk mitigation, it's largely driven by data-driven approaches, right? And thankfully, the hardware and the software ecosystem is mature enough to collect the data, whether it's weather station, whether it's drones, whether it's satellite imagery, sort of do some magic with that, with your AIs and MLs, algorithms, and come up with something which is useful, right? So like for farmer, weather advisory is so critical. Like we read newspaper, he looks at the weather data when he gets up, right? So there are enough solutions around that which are there in the market, right? Then a lot of these data-centric applications are not just used by farmers, but by the value chain players. So like banks who are lending to farmer have started to use these farm credit reports, where you capture a lot of data on the plant health and the soil health and the other parameters which can potentially risk the asset. So those models are available, but I would put this in the category where, as Alekh was referring to, the data monetization has been a challenge, right? And that's where the scale is kind of limited. Margins are very good because it's essentially an analytics play. And thankfully, there is capital for it. Like Sideshore or Cropin and multiple, even startup like Bharat, Agri or FICCI, which uses sensor, IoT devices, they've been able to raise money, right? The second bucket, which is more climate resilience, I would say, thankfully, all supply chain startups in a way are solving for it, right? Because you are disintermediating the chain, you are reducing the post-harvest losses, you're bringing farmer closer to the consumer. There's some bit of traceability which is being built in. So FarMart or a Vehicle or Dehat or an Absolute, I think all of them in a way have solved for it, right? And I'm very hopeful that, as Alekh was mentioning, that with ESG norms coming in, they won't be an option. Probably that is optional today. In this case, again, from an investor perspective, a lot of capital in agri-tech has gone into this. Like 80% of the capital has gone into this solution. Of course, it's not the only climate tech investors investing, it's all kind of investors who are investing. Scale is demonstrated. The next challenge, which I think everyone has to prove, is to demonstrate profitability, ability to list and give a good exit. So I think that's happening. The third part, which I would say on the adaptation side, I think these are more grassroots innovations. So there's a company called Distinct Horizon, which has developed a solution to prick holes in the soil and put urea balls into it, and the urea consumption goes down by almost 70%. Right? But it's someone you have to go to the farmer and tell, look, guys, use it, don't just throw urea on the soil. 80% of it is wasted. There's Urdhvam, which does bore well charging. And so the very interesting innovation, which I would call grassroots. And even I would say biologicals. There are solutions in the market. Of course, Agam talked certain quality or certain variety of biologicals, but they're like solutions there in the market which have been used, like neem-coated urea, for example, has become a norm now. So I think that is where I see the role of NGOs, FPOs, or universities to educate farmers and sort of help them adopt. In this case, I unfortunately don't see any venture capital play as of now. So there has to be a lot of catalytic capital play, which is, by foundations or multilads, which have to kind of support it. So yeah, it's an interesting landscape, if you look at from innovation and investability lens. But I would say if climate solution have to scale, startups of are doing what they can do, right? But I think policy has to support it big time. Banks have to change the way they have been lending to the sector. This whole PSL lending, I always joke, if farmer pays on time, you give interest subvention of 2%. But what if he uses 50% of the water, then which conventionally being used, does he get an incentive, right? And thankfully, I'm talking today where the data is becoming more mainstream. 10 years back, probably there was no way you can collect the data, but now you can collect the data. So can we build some climate-linked financing instruments for farmers to drive adoption? So I think that is going to be another important factor. And unless these partnership happens, regulator has to come in play. I think NABARD, RBI, they have to play a role. These products don't exist in the market. So I think that is where, and that's where we were just talking agri stack, some public data stack, hopefully a climate stack for India. We are a country of public digital goods. So why not this sector which needs the most attention?
Funny you mentioned that. So I just wanted to follow on that thought. So you mentioned here's the innovation, and this is something that the NGOs and FPOs and the others in the ecosystem need to work with. Following a thought we were talking about outside, is this an ecosystem that has been collaborating enough from that lens? Because in some ways, it doesn't all have to be a VC opportunity for you and me. It is a question of solving the problem there. And in some ways, it does feel like we've been kind of siloed in how, at least for other ecosystems and other sectors like fintech, the engagement with the government is deep enough of saying, here's what's coming next, here's the public good that enables that. So do you feel that ecosystem view based on how engagement with NGOs, the government on saying these are the innovations coming through, we don't know, we're not picking sides with the startup, but this is what you can do to support that entire ecosystem that will enable its acceleration?
Absolutely. I don't think any solution in agri-tech, forget just climate tech part of it, is going to sustain without those partnerships. Most ag techs, the average age is 3, 4, 5 years. For farmer to adopt, the first thing is not the solution, is the credibility of the person who's suggesting the solution. Right? And look at the IFCOs of the world, or Mahindras of the world, and TEFEs and DCM Shrirams of the world. They've been existing for like 50, 70 years, and that's where they build that trust, so that farmer trusts them blindly now. I think these ag techs are new, if as Absolute or a farmer or anyone who goes them, they will first question, who are these guys? Why should I even listen to them? And that's where you need to figure out these influencers, which are sometimes NGOs, sometimes an FPO, sometimes even a KVK, which is in the village, or these village level entrepreneurs. I think that is becoming a very important community. These are essentially progressive farmers or the retailer or someone who really has some sort of trust from the farmer. I think why don't we identify them and start, it's like train the trainer. I think they need to be trained first before the solution goes to the farmer. But I think that's why, agri-tech is, I would say, a bit different from many of the sectors, because unfortunately, I think the onus of ecosystem building lies with us. It's not that people are building it for us. So I think that's going to happen. A lot of these things were optional. They're becoming very, very important. Farmer thankfully realizes that saving water is important. Too much chemicals are bad for soil. There are hardly any earthworms into soil. There are hardly any microbial activity happening into soil, which is reflected into the way the yields are stagnating in India. It's alarming. It's solvable, but alarming. So I think that realization is there. The challenge is how to make him or her aware about the solution that exists in the market and take them to them, build some evidence so that there is credibility to the solution. And that's where things will happen.
So I just wanted to also, one common question to Alekh, Agam, both of you, is you've seen the kind of export buyers and these kind of foreign global buyers start to look at the Indian ecosystem. Like you briefly mentioned this from a traceability perspective, but what are they looking at, which is kind of a big evolution in the view that they've had on this is what we're looking at, here's best in class. And is that an opportunity for us to say, this is where, we can meet their needs right now, but is that a more global play also for us to say, here's, once we've understood this from a Indian market and how our dynamics play out here, to say, cater almost to similar models and demands from a global south of saying this is where more broadly they may have needs from that same export buyer's lens?
So I think global demand, so like food security, I don't think so is a national issue anymore. It's more of a global challenge for the world. And I don't see a solution where globally we don't collaborate as nations. I think next 10 years, probably the hardest challenge is going to be feeding the world. And I don't say it from any skepticism, but as an opportunity for India. And I think if government intervention keeps on happening the way it is, it's going to be very hard for India to have a very dominant place in its world as a power or a superpower, whatever it's called. But I think from a demand perspective, there's absolutely huge level of demand for Indian produce. There's a huge level of interest in Indian food supply chains. And if sustainability can be layered in as a solution, I fundamentally believe that we can be the food provider to a lot of the world. And I think, gone are the days where we are very, very scared about our national security in terms of our food security. But honestly, it's a huge opportunity which I feel we're not capitalizing enough on as a nation.
I'll pick up from where Alekh left. Today, I mean, we have origins like where we grow in about 21 countries, and just last quarter, for the first time, we started our revenue in India. I mean, all of those countries we used to, including India, we used to grow and sell in countries otherwise from India. Now we've started India also. So what I see is that, see, a lot of these commodities, for instance, pulses we are deficient in, so we'll get from Tanzania, Malawi, Canada, somewhere. Similarly, soybean will come from somewhere in Africa, coffee will come from somewhere else. So all of these commodities are regional in nature. So there is some sort of regional sufficiency across all of these commodities. For instance, grapes will go out from India to the world. So pomegranate will go out from India to the world. So some crops are larger in some belts and some crops are absolutely absent in some belts. For this to imagine in a utopian world where every country will become self-sufficient, I do not see that happening over the next 7 to 10 years. We do not have a pathway to that, even in 15 years. Can we talk about a regional sufficiency? Of course, that is a conversation we must have. But given the geopolitical diaspora that's created recently with all of the things that we are seeing in the world, very few places in the world are left which are safe, considered safe as a long-term sourcing location. India features on one of those. Africa is another. And so anybody, even startups or anybody building out of these locations with a very long-term view are more likely to succeed and then, of course, feed the world in the larger context of things. So that's why.
So I kind of open question based on the last note that you had, Agam, is you are seeing this evolution also now with this more complicated geopolitical environment that we have seen in the last 18 months, 24 months, whatever it has been since this more complicated environment's played out with multiple wars now that we're looking at globally. Do you see that as a bit of a fillip and an opportunity from that global sourcing lens of saying what were relatively established sourcing channels first broke 2020 with COVID, then broke with the Ukraine war, broke again, or potentially are going to be breaking again with what's potentially another war that may be running in parallel globally. Do you see this as kind of a fillip of saying, here's why buyer behaviors may radically shift?
So if you look at the entire history of our planet since the time we've been consuming on record since 1700s, there have been few inflection points. One of them was cupping off the shipping container when commodities started getting shipped in bulk, and therefore some countries became larger in commodity trades. And the second one was when we got into processing of those commodities, and you had the machine age which came in, and then some countries became larger than the other by virtue of that. I think this is one of those inflection point opportunities where suddenly lots of part of the world are in not the very safe operating zone. And therefore, that gives countries like India a very large opportunity to just go and fill in. For instance, Ukraine, which was supplying 20-25% of the world's sort of wheat. I mean, suddenly you have an opportunity to go and fill in. But what that should be complemented with is a very stable policy. For instance, we can't say that this year we won't supply sugar because there is scarcity, or maybe there is a hunch of scarcity and not a real scarcity. And even if there is, as a country which looks to provide the world and become the food bowl, you need to be very consistent on producing at scale more than what you need, and such that you can feed the world, and then the world will look up to you. So I think there is some responsibility with the government and some responsibility with the companies like us.
So I'm also just going to quickly check if we have a question from the audience. We have about a minute left. So okay, one in the front, and if we have time, one in the back.
This is for Agam. Usually when we hear entrepreneurs or just any discussion on sustainability, it's very polarized. It's very unidimensional. So you display a very holistic clarity when it comes to sustainability and overall and from a business perspective, which I really appreciate. But running a business, which is you're almost like a 3M of materials, and which is in today, like even 3M like 50 years ago or 30 years ago was a great success story, but it's now at a kind of crossroads. So running a business which is in so many different products, so many different verticals. I see you already changed the name there from Absolute Foods to Absolute, which kind of is almost. Do you see yourself as a holdco, and what are the challenges? Like, you're doing so many things. How sustainable is that model itself?
Very good question. I think, see, life is a function of people and capital, only two things. And so when you look at whether your life or your business, you can't go and fight all the battles. Even in the days of war, nobody went and fought all the battles themselves, and you can't do that. So you need great people to fight those battles for you. And so in life, I think the foremost function is life is a function of people. So if you have enough good people who can own things and can run shows, I mean, all companies were built that way. And so today, I mean, even Absolute was always sort of built like a holdco with all of these business lines. Absolute Foods is our commodity trade business. Because that business got commercialized first, everybody got to know of that, and media wrote about that, but we have always been as a group called Absolute.
Okay, so the single biggest challenge is that across any vertical, any industry today is good people. And, how do you, in these good people challenge times, how are you managing this good people? Where's your source of that secret source of that good people?
See, good people, I mean, you have to understand that we were born in India, but the world is home. And so you will have people coming from all across the world. Today we hire, I mean, we were just chatting outside. I mean, at a point when COVID happened, we were hiring from Valley more than we were hiring in India. So we today have people who moved back to India from US, from Israel, from South Korea, Japan, China, almost 32 countries. And I mean, if you do some good work and people like it, they'll come back and they'll start working for the cause. So I think purpose is profound. And if you have a strong purpose, people will come. But it is very important to set good processes in place. And processes take time. So we spent 2 years setting up processes. Now it's pretty much well in shape.
Thank you guys for all taking out the time. We were anyways talking for a while outside, no other time that could probably go on for a while, but I will let Upasana take the mic back so that we can move on with the programming. Since we're towards the end of the day, you can anyways catch all of us outside in a bit.
Thank you very much, panel. Thank you, Shiva, for putting all this together. And thank you, Agam. Thank you, Alekh. And thank you, Hemendra. Just a little token of our appreciation. Thank you so much.